The 106th Regiment of Foot was an infantry regiment of the British Army from 1862 to 1881, the third to bear the number after the Black Musqueteers and a regiment raised briefly in 1794. It was formed by renaming the 2nd Bombay European Regiment, formed by the Honourable East India Company in 1839. In 1881 the 106th Regiment was joined with the 68th Regiment of Foot to form the Durham Light Infantry as its second regular battalion. History. Origins. On the 29th of July 1839 the Honourable East India Company resolved to add a regiment of infantry to each of the armies of the presidencies. The smallest presidency thus gained the 2nd Bombay Regiment at Pune, based around a cadre of officers and men from the 1st Bombay European Regiment returned from Kargil and Aden. The regiment was intended from the start to be a light infantry regiment, and although the order for that was revoked in January 1840, it was reinstated in that November. By that time the regiment was over its establishment strength of 967 officers and men, including 87 men from the wreck of the Lord William Bentinck. Early deployments. The first deployment of the regiment occurred when Sir Charles Napier annexed Sindh using troops from the Bombay Presidency. The regiment was used to replace garrison troops used for that expedition, and from March 1843, one wing was based in Bhuj. The other wing had been sent to Karachi. By October, 276 out of 437 men of the Bhuj wing were sick with malaria. The whole regiment was then moved back to Belgaum in March 1844 to recover. Later in the year a detachment of 225 officers and men was formed and sent to Kolhapur state, together with other native, European and Crown forces. After a revolt had broken out over the company policies in the area, the effects of malaria were still present. However, when the detachment was inspected on the 16th of September before it marched off, it did not escape my observation the delicate and sickly appearance of many of the 200 men from the 2nd Europeans. However, the regiment participated in the storming of Samangar Fort on the 12th of October, with detachments on both storming columns together with 20th Madras Native Infantry, 23rd Bombay Native Infantry with additional covering riflemen. On the 1st of December the regiment's men were also involved in taking Panhala Fort with companies from the 21st Bombay Native Infantry, 16th and 23rd Madras Native Infantry and 2nd Regiment. That same evening 50 men from the 2nd Europeans with the men from 20th Madras and the 22nd Regiment forced the way into nearby Pawingaur with Private Daniels and Bugler Toole, the first men in. On the 9th of December Rangur Fort was evacuated after a stockade before it was broken by a column of 100 men of the regiment in a frontal attack. By the end of the year and into 1845 the force was increasingly dispersed to deal with the many forts on the area and farther away as the rebels dispersed. The regiment's first campaign cost it 13 dead and 31 wounded. In 1846 the 2nd Europeans were presented with the first colours while at Belgaum. The regiment was then moved from India to the Aden colony, relieving the 94th Regiment, returning to India in two wings. One in January 1848 which initially went to Pune and the other in December 1849. The wing in Pune transferred 100 volunteers to its parent regiment which took part in the Second Sikh War. In November 1853, after marching to Karachi, the regiments applied a cadre of officers and men to form the 3rd Bombay European Regiment. In December it was moved again to Hyderabad, where in 1854 it was to suffer from malaria, and in December 1855 had its name altered to the 2nd European Regiment, Bombay Light Infantry. Persia in 1856 and the outbreak of the Anglo-Persian War, the 2nd Europeans were organized into part of a 2nd Brigade of an expeditionary field force and were sent to Karachi, where they were made up to an establishment of 929 of all ranks. In November they left for the Persian Gulf and landed at Hilala Bay, south of the port of Bushehr on the 7th of December. Intending to capture the port, the expedition commander, Maj. General Stalker, assaulted a roadblock of some 1-2,000 tribesmen at Risha with 2 companies of the 2nd Europeans and 2 of the 4th Bombay Native Infantry, and covered by 3rd Regiment of Bombay Light Cavalry on the 9th of December. Driving the tribesmen from the village, the remainder retired to an old Dutch fort, which was surrounded and assaulted by the 2nd Europeans, 64th Regiment and 20th Bombay Native Infantry. The next day the ships of the Indian Navy subjected the town of Bushehr to bombardment for 2 hours, which led to its surrender as the troops were approaching the walls by land. By the beginning of February 1857, after the arrival of a 2nd Division and more cavalry, the commander Sir James Outram launched an attack on the Persians' camp at Borazjan. On the 3rd of February, a force of 5,000 men set out, with nearly 700 of the 2nd Europeans, on a 46-mile journey with no tents, over harsh terrain. The Persians were surprised on the afternoon of the 5th of February and fled. The stores and arms were destroyed. Returning to Bushehr on the 7th of February, the rear guard was attacked by Persian cavalry at 11 p.m. near the village of Kushaban. The column circled to protect the baggage train. At daybreak the 2nd Europeans were in the front line of the attack as the Persians fell back under cavalry and artillery assault. The regiment lost 3 killed and 8 wounded. The regiment did not take part in the expedition to the Shatt al-Arab and remained at Bushehr until the 15th of May, returning to Karachi at the end of the month. Indian Mutiny. The Indian Mutiny had begun in March in the Bengal Presidency, would not see such intensity in the Bombay Presidency, and the regiment would see a mostly policing role. While in Karachi, 118 men volunteered for the 1st European Regiment and left for Multan on the 1st of June. Only 2 of the 32 native infantry battalions mutinied, and only the 27th Bombay Infantry went so far as to kill some of their officers. The left wing of the regiment was sent to Bombay in August, and was immediately split up into companies and smaller detachments to police the region at Bigalam, Ratnagiri and Kolhapur. In September, the right wing, after disarming the 21st Bombay N.I., was sent to Vengala, shortly joining the detachment at Bigalam, then reinforcing the Kolhapur detachment and sending others to Darwar and Kalaji. The detachment of 100 men sent to Kolhapur arrived on the 16th of August, and the next day with 450 of the Kolhapur local infantry, disarmed the 27th Bombay N.I. A court-martial convicted 21 of the leading mutineers. These men were executed, with 8 of them being blown from cannon. The detachment was reinforced by 67 men from Bigalam and Ratnagiri, and on 5 to 6 December succeeded in suppressing a rising in the city with the loss of only 2 men. In February 1858 a detachment of 89 men from Kalaji joined a field force which left the boundaries of the Bombay Presidency for Shorapur, only to find a rising there defeated by other company forces. Crown service. As a consequence of the mutiny in August, an Act for the Better Governance of India was passed in the British Parliament. It reached the troops in India in a proclamation on the 1st of November. The company forces were now to be Crown forces. This precipitated the White Mutiny over the terms of enlistment in many of the newer company regiments. Men who did not wish to become Crown soldiers were allowed to take their discharges, and from the 2nd Europeans 379 men did so in July 1859, leaving for England from Goa. On the 3rd of November 1859 the regiment was renamed Her Majesty's 2nd Regiment of Bombay European Light Infantry, and presented with new colours in November 1860 in Bombay, which included a generous allocation of battle honours from the Persian expedition granted in October 1858. During 1859 and 1860 there was much debate on the future of the former company regiments. Amalgamation with the British Army, with service anywhere in the Empire and being based in Britain were seen as the only option for the company's European forces. The 101st to the 109th regiments were thus created, based on the older company regiments, with the remains of younger company regiments, such as the 4th, 5th and 6th Bombay Europeans filling the ranks. On the 30th of July 1862, while in the unhealthy station of Mymach in Rajputana, the 11 officers and 501 men of the 2nd Europeans became Her Majesty's 106th Regiment of Foot. The regiment stayed in Nimacha until January 1864, moving to Nasirabad where it suffered a cholera outbreak, losing 10 men. In 1867 the regiment marched 600 miles to Mainmere where it suffered more seriously from cholera, losing 53 men. 1866 Jervis Court in Marshall. On the 25th of June 1866, the regiment's captain Ernest Scott Jervis was court-martialed. He was found guilty of insubordination, but acquitted on charges of misappropriating goods, which included the commander-in-chief of the forces in India's mutton and pickles. The court found that he be dismissed from service but also recommended mercy. The commander-in-chief, Sir William Mansfield, instead had Jervis dismissed and his name struck off the returns of the 106th. The case was widely reported and the process, and Mansfield himself, were subject to criticism over the way the matter was handled. Mansfield, it was said, has hunted his victim to ruin with a ruthless and persevering energy which could not have been exceeded if it had been directed against the enemies of his country. It is impossible to believe that a man who could so stultify himself and disgrace his high office and his English blood can be allowed to retain the all but most responsible post in India. In September 1867, Prince George, Duke of Cambridge, Commander-in-Chief of the forces, sent a dispatch to Mansfield in which he severely rebuked him, but also censured, in the strongest terms, the reprehensible insubordination of Jervis. The following month, the matter was raised in the British Parliament, with further criticism of Mansfield, but a vote to restore Jervis to his position was defeated 60 to 48. To Britain, the effects of cholera, the discharge of older men from company days and the arrival of large drafts from the regiment's depot, which had been moving around Britain as a normal Crown depot, speeded the assimilation into the British Army. The regiment moved to Ambala in 1867 and then to Jhansi in 1870. The localization scheme of the Cardwell reforms resulted in the regiment being paired with the 68th Regiment, and the regiment's depot moving to Sunderland, sharing premises with the depots of the 68th and the District Brigade. In December 1873, 20 officers and 672 men embarked at Bombay for Portsmouth. While stationed on the Isle of Wight, new colours were presented by the Princess Royal on 14 August 1874, with the 1860 colours laid up at St. Thomas Church in Newport. In 1879, while at Preston, the regiment sent 455 men to its linked regiment while it was in India. In March 1880, now only 16 officers and 381 men strong, the regiment was transferred to Ireland. Amalgamation. On 1 July 1881, while the regiment was in the Royal Barracks in Dublin, the men were paraded and informed that as part of the Childers reforms they were now amalgamated with the 68th Regiment of Foot into one regiment, to become the 2nd Battalion of the Durham Light Infantry. Battle Honours. Colonels. Colonels of the regiment were 2nd Bombay Regiment Col. George Benjamin Brooks, October 1839 to 1840. Colonel Sir Ephraim Gurish Stannis, CB 1840 May 1850. Marge. Gen. Foster Stalker, May 1850 March 1857. Marge. Gen. Thomas Cheese Parr, March 1857 September 1862. 106th Regiment of Foot LT. Gen. David Capon, K. CB, September 1862 December 1869. LT. Gen. Maurice Barlow, Chevalier Legion of Honor, December 1869 August 1870. LT. Gen. Hon. George Cadogan, K. CB, August 1870 May 1874. LT. Gen. William O'Grady Haley, CB, May 1874 November 1875. Marge. Gen. John Jarvis Bissett, K. CMG, CB, November 1875 May 1893. Bibliography. Ward, SGP. Faithful. The Story of the Durham Light Infantry. Naval and Military Press. ISBN 9781741,471,471. The Vane, the Hon. W.L. The Durham Light Infantry. The United Red and White Rose. Naval and Military Press. ISBN 9781845,741,464.